Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start the meeting. So this is the council meeting for February 6th, 2023. I'll take a motion to approve the agenda as amended with the pink items. So this is correspondence from Johnny, Chelsea, and Eden Rands to be added to 10A of the agenda. Moved by Mayor Little, seconded by, okay, I'll even do it that way. Moved by Councillor Donaldson, seconded by Councillor Gray. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thanks, Jay. Okay, we have a presentation from Alison, LeDuc regarding Anchorages. Welcome.
Thank you. Speak directly into mine. Okay, I will try. So, yes, my name is Alison, LeDuc. My presentation is related to item 7A, the proposed resolution for the Association of the Vancouver Island and Coastal Communities Convention with respect to reducing freighter anchorages outside the Port of Vancouver. I'm happy to answer any questions either as we go or at the end. I'm not sure what your protocol is. But I'd like to begin by saying that I'm not pretending to be an expert. I'm interested if anybody has credible sources of information that they'd like me to look at or that should be considered by. But however, the deadline to submit resolutions to the AVICC is this Thursday. So I am hoping that you will agree with me that there's sufficient information in the draft resolution and in the presentation tonight to send the resolution to the AVICC. So I've included written references in the footnotes and so on. I've also reached out to Transport Canada and Port of Vancouver and the Pacific Pilotage Association for more information quite a while ago and received no response. I'm also waiting to hear from a faculty member at UBC Sauder School of Business. She specializes in governance and innovation in maritime transport. There's questions that I have and I think that you probably have and we asked Kat about, well, what are the definitive list of factors that are creating the congestion in the Port of Vancouver and why hasn't that been fixed and so on, and what explains the drastic increase in the use of anchorages in the Salish Sea in the last decade. So still trying to find that out. I know some of the factors, but not all of them, I think. And also, I think another really important question is whether there's any movement within Transport Canada and or the Port of Vancouver towards infrastructure upgrades, efficiencies, and vessel arrival systems that have reduced or eliminated the need for anchorages around the world. So, more information to come, but I think we have enough to proceed tonight. So, freighter anchorages. Just briefly go through this because I saw that it was actually loaded into the agenda package and it's available online. So this I included the URL because it's not easy to see, so you can always check it out for yourself. But basically there are 5 anchorages at Royal Roads. There's 5 anchorages at Constance Bank. So those are the 2 sections that are off of our waters, and then Southern Gulf Islands 33, and then there's Port of Vancouver has 28 itself. So you can see how dense they are in the Southern Gulf Islands, which is considered a separate section. We're not part of the Southern Gulf Islands. It's just another view of those Southern Gulf Islands anchorages. And so as of January 22, when I took that screenshot, there were 23 freighters, and some have been there more than 3 weeks. Here's a chart of the 5 anchorages at Royal Roads, so you can see just in respect to, between Albert Head and Esquimalt. And then Constance Bank is further off, so it's in a sort of a triangle there with Ross Bay Cemetery and Constance Bank and William Head. And so this again is just to orient people that this is from the Transport Safety Board of Canada investigation report about the fire on board the Zim Kingston, because that's where they put it, was Constance Bank. And so the firefighting efforts extended over 5 days at that anchorage. So Anchorages, it's almost all bulk carriers or freighters that are waiting to be loaded with coal or grain at the Port of Vancouver. We don't really get any container ships because they're processed very efficiently. So, and a third of the coal shipped through the Port of Vancouver comes from the US because the Washington and Oregon, I think California as well, have been shutting down their own coal ports due to environmental concerns. So coal from the western US is now shipped through Vancouver. And that's certainly one of the factors that's led to the increase in anchorages. But I still haven't been able to figure out why the dramatic increase in anchorages, because the actual increase in bulk cargo is only about 10%, and there's been this massive increase in the use of anchorages. So, and at the bottom there, it just shows you the magnitude of the increase. So, and that's for Southern Gulf Islands. I don't have the figures for the anchorages off of our coast. So, the reason that I got interested in it is because of the potential for and the actual environmental harms. Each ship at anchor produces about 10 tons of greenhouse gases a day. The underwater noise is very harmful to pretty much everything that lives in the water. There's seabed scouring from the chains, and there's scrubber discharge. And I actually spoke to a senior ocean scientist on Friday, and he was actually, his biggest concern was the scrubber discharge, which sort of surprised me. So seabed scouring from Anchorage, you can see that the actual length of the anchor chains is quite a lot longer than the depth, up to 10 times. So that illustration isn't really accurate in that sense, but it does show you just the habitat fragmentation and the loss of biodiversity and ecosystem disruption and so on. Also carbon storage in the seabed. It reduces that. So this is a little bit better illustration, although it's showing you a small boat. But I read that it's up to 10 times the depth of the water at times. There's a formula. And so if the Royal Roads anchorages, say, are 25 meters in depth, then you could have 250 meters of anchor chain on the seabed. And then as the ships swing in the tides and the wind, it just scours it. Yeah. So scrubbers, ships burn heavy fuel oil, which releases high amounts of sulfur and other nasty things into the air. The scrubbers use a fine mist of water to remove that sulfur from the ship exhaust, but then they actually just wash it into the ocean. So that's really not good. And let's see, there's this recent Swedish study that found that it has severe toxic effects on food sources for cod, herring, and other important fish species. And so the VFPA is the Vancouver Fraser Port Authority, and they have jurisdiction over the Port of Vancouver, but they don't have jurisdiction over the ships in our anchorages because these are not part of the, the anchorages themselves are not part of the Port of Vancouver. So they have begun the process of banning the discharge of scrubber wash water, but only within the Port of Vancouver boundaries. As far as I know, and according to UBC, within the last few months, they're still allowed to discharge in our water. And so then just a few accident risks. So this was all new to me, between 2015 and 2020, there were 102 anchor dragging incidents on the BC coast. In 2020, a freighter dragged anchor and punched a hole in another freighter. Luckily, no spills, but a month later, another freighter dragged anchor and came close to beaching itself near Ladysmith. And then this is quite interesting to me, that ships in distress are often sent to Constance Bank, which is off of our water, because that is known to be highly valuable fish habitat. And yet it's used for emergency anchorage for ships in distress. So, and then the last one, bunkering is allowed at the Royal Roads anchorages. I was told by the harbor master at the DND that he's been there for 3.5 years and it's only ever happened once, but the fact is that bunkering is fueling at sea and it is allowed. So it just seems like possibilities for spills there. So there are efficiencies and especially these vessel arrival systems that are used now around the world, and they have really reduced the anchorages. So for instance, Los Angeles implemented a new system in November of 2021, and the number of anchors, or ships at anchor, was reduced from 86 to 17. Similar results with the Port of Oakland. And I think the important point is that the new systems don't reduce the overall number of ships coming into the port, but they significantly reduce anchorages and emissions, of course, from anchored vessels. So the BC government does have jurisdiction over the seabed, even though transport is federal, within the federal jurisdiction. And I just wanted to point out that this idea of forming a sort of a committee, Adam Olson from Saanich North, working with Transport Canada, Vancouver Fraser Port Authority, and the BC Chamber of Shipping, which represents the shipping industry, but also First Nations and other residents. And so they formed a sort of a working group and to see if there's anything that can be done, and just certainly to make sure that the best information is available, and that rather than just increasing the number of anchorages, maybe they back up a bit and look at the root causes. So there's just a summary of the information, and this is one of my favorite fishes. It's called a red Irish lord. And these are photographs from the water off of Vancouver Island. This is not from the tropics. And so, but I think it's important to note things like, computer simulations indicate that if the infrastructure at the Port of Vancouver was upgraded and efficiencies were really found, and then they had a vessel arrival system that matched up the loading capacity and the freighters, they could possibly reduce anchorages enough so that our anchorages would not be needed by freighters. And that is an alabaster nudibranch. Again, taken in the water off of Vancouver Island. And so I think it's important to note that residents and MPs and Islands Trust have been lobbying hard, and they are getting attention. And one of the options that has been put forward by a few people is Victoria doesn't have nearly as many anchorages as the Southern Gulf Islands, so why don't you put some in the warships down there? And so I just think that it's maybe it's an investment for us to maybe get involved and say, rather than increasing the anchorages, let's look at increasing efficiencies and reducing the need for anchorages. So I think that's it.
Okay.
Any questions?
Okay, thank you very much. Very informative. I had no idea about scrubbers and other things, and the deleterious effects of the anchors. So, Council, would you like to, we've lost Jay, we'll just keep going. Council, are there any questions for Alison LeDuc? Yeah, I wanted to ask a question if there's no others. Do you see any movement with Transport Canada and the Port of Vancouver, any willingness? It just seems like it's happened. And it's not just actually in the Southern Gulf Islands. When you are on the south sides of Dodds Narrows, and if you look down the channel, you can see the anchors parked in front of Ladysmith, and also up towards Galliano as well. And they've just appeared in the last 4 years, really. Yeah.
So, and they're actually considering putting another 5 anchorages at the top end of Galliano.
Oh.
And so, do I see any movement? The Port of Vancouver has been involved in a consultation process, but only for the Southern Gulf Islands. It excludes us. And so that's kind of why I got interested. I attended a webinar about it, and then realized that it doesn't apply to us. So I don't know why that is, but so they are considering various options, but according to one sort of observer, they are not seriously considering a vessel arrival system or upgrades to the infrastructure that would make a serious difference. So I think more work is needed.
And that's where it's made a difference, is when there's changes made right at the site where there's problems, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the infrastructure, I mean, just as an example, it seems very odd to me, but they can't load grain in the rain in Vancouver. And it rains 165 days a year on average. And so then that just holds everything up. So they do have infrastructure in other ports where they can load grain, because you can't load wet grain. I know that, but there are solutions in other ports, right? And so things like that affect us. Mind you, the Royal Roads anchorages seem to be mostly coal freighters.
Okay. Any other questions or comments for Alison?
Yeah, I do have one question, but first a comment. Alison, great work in putting this together and linking what is it like a subterranean or subsurface environmental issue to like some of the standard or just some of the business and process practices that are at hand. One question: do you think that there's any room to go after like anchoring practices themselves? And I mean, it was quite telling when you mentioned that like an anchor chain in 25 meters of water might actually be 250 meters. There's safety considerations for sure, but I just wonder if there's a way of attacking that part of the problem as well.
So some ports around the world have fixed anchorages so that they are actually, the ships attach above the seabed, so they don't need to anchor that, but unless you have some sort of a fixed point, I mean, you can't have anchors, or you can't have ships just, being not securely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So unless you have some sort of, again, it's an infrastructure upgrade that would be necessary, and yeah.
Okay.
And let me ask Councillor Shuke, we discussed that, and there's an issue with the fixed anchorages, which is that the whales get tangled up in them.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not as popular in this part of the world.
Gotcha.
And then there's things like the scrubber discharge that could be addressed by Transport Canada. And again, I haven't gotten any information from Transport Canada about whether they are actually considering that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Councillor Ed?
Well, thank you. That was a really great report. And obviously we have the resolution ready to go to the AVICC. But I was wondering, besides that, what do you think council should do?
Well, I really like the idea of forming that sort of forum like Adam Olson did, and see if there's any, I'm just sort of poking around the outside.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have any inside information, and so I'm thinking that, if we could maybe go through our MLA or another, because I know Murray Rankin, who is the MLA for Oak Bay, in his materials, he was quite interested in the seabed as well. So it may be, MLAs from the whole Victoria area, I don't know. I did ask Marianne Alto on the way in whether there was anybody in Victoria that was interested in the issue, and she didn't recall if there had been any. But I think once people find out just the potential for harm, they might be more interested.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Any other comments? If not, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll be readdressing this on page 21, 7A of the agenda. Okay, moving on to public participation. Does anybody wish to speak at this meeting? 4 minutes per person, and please identify yourself.
Patty Whitehouse, 5311 Rocky Point Road. And I want to thank Council for the effort that you're putting into keeping closer to your mics and speaking clearly into them. It's noticeable. I really appreciate it. I also want to address a comment that was, yeah, good job. A comment that was made at last council meeting about the possibility that perhaps council should get better mics because these ones perhaps aren't good enough. my first comment on that is they're much better than the ones that council had when I first moved to Metchosin in 2014. Second is that they may not be the best in the world, but if you use them correctly, they are quite effective. And the third is that it doesn't matter how expensive a mic is, if you don't use it correctly, it's not useful. So my suggestion would be stick with what you've got and keep on practicing what you're practicing. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak at public participation? Seeing none, we'll move on to the adoption of the minutes. This is on page 3 of your council agenda. So we have the council meeting from January 23rd, 2023. What say ye?
So move for adoption.
Moved by Councillor Shukin, seconded by Councillor Gray. Comment, concerns? If not, I'll call the question. All in favor? Councillor Shukin? Did you say something? Okay. Okay. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, moving on to the special council meetings of January 24th. This is on page 9 of your agenda.
I'll move adoption.
Moved by Councillor Epp, seconded by Councillor Donaldson. Comments? Call the question. All in favor? Councillor Shukin?
I'm in support, thank you.
Okay. Opposed? Seeing none, motion carried. The special council meeting of January 31st. That's on page 11. This is the special council meeting January 31st. Let's see.
Moved for acceptance.
Moved by Councillor Donaldson, seconded by Councillor
I'll
Epp.
second this.
Yeah, Councillor Shukin. All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Carried. Okay. Receipt of the minutes. This is on page 13 of your council package. This is the District of Metchosin Board of Variance minutes. I'll take a motion to receive the minutes. Moved by Councillor Donaldson, seconded by Councillor Epp. Comments? Seeing none, call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank
I'm
you.
in support.
Thank you. Okay, moving quickly to the mayor's report. Okay, first off, I'd just like to thank the fire chief. She attended a conference this week, the BC Wildlife Service training conference. She was also asked to give a presentation regarding role in wildfire and her role in the administration of a structure protection. So I thank her for that and thank her for representing our community so well. Moving on to other honors in the community. As I mentioned at the December 11th meeting, we attended a Royal Canadian Navy reception. We heard of 2 people within the community who received honors, and I thought we should actually name them. So Chief Petty Officer 2nd Class Ian Biller received the Order of Military Merit, and the District of Metchosin would like to send their congratulations on that. And then the second was the Chief Petty Officer, oh sorry, that was, am I getting these mixed up now? No? Chief Petty Officer. And then the, Sailor First Class Ralph Charles Chamberlain, CD, received the Commander of the Royal Canadian Navy Commendation. You can see here what he was recognized for. Very brave, this individual. Evidently, the Order of Military Merit is not given out very often, so I think it's worth mentioning. So congratulations to that community member as well. So please join me in recognizing and congratulating these 2 remarkable individuals. Okay, the second item is we have the coldest night of the year coming up. We invite members of the community to walk with us. We're walking in Souk as a part of Team Metchosin. We're registered on the website. Please consider donating to this cause and joining Metchosin and the Souk Council in Metchosin on February 25th. I hear we've raised more money of late, and Anybody else have any comments, questions? Okay. Councillor Shukin, you still with us?
I am.
Okay, great. And thirdly, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the CRD. We had discussed earlier the CRD Arts Commission, but I thought I would give a bit of a summary because, as I've mentioned, we submit a lot of money to our involvement with the Capital Regional District, but we also receive a lot in return. So on Southern Vancouver Island, the Capital Regional District is a regional government. It is a government. It's with these 13 municipalities and 3 electoral areas. There is the Capital Region Housing Corporation as a part of that. The role of the CRD is to facilitate regional decision-making on that issue that transcend multiple boundaries and provide services efficiently and effectively throughout the region. Residents in our community are represented and participate and realize the benefits through 3 distinct types of CRD services: the regional, as I mentioned, with the 13 municipalities; the sub-regional, where there's 2 or more jurisdictions are served; and at the local and electoral areas. So the CRD is governed by a 24-member board of directors, a member of the board of directors, and it's comprised of elected officials from the municipalities and the electoral areas. We have commissions as well. One of the committees that I chair, the Victoria Family Court and Youth Justice, is a delegated commission, but there's also Wander Fuqua Water as well. So as a local government, the CRD develops partnerships to facilitate and deliver projects and service for a sustainable, livable, and a vibrant capital region. They conduct their business on Coast Salish and Nuchala territories, and they're very mindful of the relationship with the First Nations. Just to bring it back home, what we've been doing is at the CRD board table is orientation meetings and strategic priority setting. We've also recently adopted at the governance committee a motion to consider a new code of conduct. So as a municipality, we'll be able to take from that, from their developing this code of conduct. And of the 7 CRD boards, I've been appointed to the following: the Finance, the First Nations Committee, the Planning and Protective Services, and the Governance, and I was asked to chair the Governance Committee. And recently I was appointed the Vice Chair of the Greater Victoria Labour Relations Association. So I just thought I'd give you a little bit more context about what the CRD, what they do for us, their governance model, and I think at a future date I'll ask the CEO, Mr. Ted Robbins, to give us a presentation, maybe after the budget season. Okay, any other comments? So with that, that is the Mayor's report. So moving on to business arising on page 21 of your council agenda. Aha, okay, so now we're dealing with what Alison was referring to in terms of the presentations. So as what we heard, there is potential risk to our coastal ecosystems. What is before you here is resolutions that could be made to the 2023 Association for the Vancouver Island Coastal Communities, or the AVICC, and Councillor Shukin and Gray had worked on this, and so I'll hand it over to one of you to speak to this resolution. Councillor Shukin or Gray?
Mayor Little, I would just one correction. This is Councillor Gray's work.
Okay.
Which I applaud and will support, but I can turn it over to him.
Okay, great. Councillor Gray.
Thank you. So I'd move that Council adopt the recommendation from the Metchosin Environmental Advisory Select Committee and endorse the following resolution towards reducing anchorages outside the Port of Vancouver. Whereas the Salish Sea is a sensitive marine ecosystem and critical habitat for many species, including endangered southern resident killer whales, and the use of freighter anchorages outside the Port of Vancouver for ships waiting to be loaded in the Port of Vancouver is extremely detrimental to the marine ecosystem. And whereas ports in other parts of the world have reduced or eliminated the need for freighter anchorages by upgrading infrastructure, increasing efficiencies, and implementing port call optimization systems, therefore be it resolved that the Association of Vancouver Island and Coastal Communities and the Union of BC Municipalities request the federal government and the Vancouver-Fraser Port Authority take all available actions to immediately reduce the use of freighter anchorages along southern Vancouver Island and the southern Gulf Islands, and that Transport Canada expand monitoring and inspection of freighters anchored outside the limits of the Port of Vancouver. If there's a seconder, I'll just offer a word or two.
Okay, I've got a motion on the table from Councillor Gray, seconded by Councillor Donaldson. You wish to speak to this?
Yeah, I just wanted to offer a special thanks to Alison LeDuc, who's done a tremendous amount of work on this and preparing it all. We heard from you tonight, Alison. Thanks so much. And also to Rick Perron, who's been helping shepherd this through MIASC, and Tina Hansen, our Deputy CO, who's had a big part of getting all these documents together for us. It is obviously a serious issue with adverse environmental impacts and shoreline risks, and that's why we're moving to it. I wanted to just mention that in the past, I guess 2 weeks, we heard from a local resident here, Gay Goldie, who lives up on Delgado, and she pointed out the noise that they hear from the freighters and the bright sodium lights that are there have been a real problem to the community, the part of the Metchosin community that's over there. So there's a direct impact on Metchosin residents for these freighters as they're placed out at the Royal Bay Anchorage. Interestingly, Gay's spoken with Jimmy Pattison about it. Jimmy apparently owns a bunch of these freighters, and he owns the West Shore Terminal and the coal place over there. She's spoken with the pilotage authorities on a regular basis to ask them to turn off the sodium lights because they're very bright and it's not legal for them to be on at nighttime. Gay's had a significant involvement, and she's been helping us just think through some of these things. So it's a regional issue. The federal government's involved, but it's also a local issue. And just to mention one other thing is that because of some other work that the council's engaged in around shorelines, I was asked to talk to some of the council members in Colwood. And I heard this evening from David Grove. I also spoke with Ian Ward, but David was in touch to say that it's too late for Colwood to provide a formal endorsement to this resolution for the annual general meeting of the Vancouver Island Coastal Communities. But he expects that we'll have good support from council members, various council members, when it comes to a vote at the conference. And then finally, just a word so people are aware, there is another consultation that the province has just launched looking for advice about the shoreline and issues here. And we're going to bring that through MIASC, and we have 3 issues. Of course, the Trans Mountain issue, the anchorages, and then the marine response. So we have another way of putting an oar in the water, shall I say, with regards to the provincial jurisdiction, but that'll come to council at another time.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Councillor, was it Chukin?
Well, thanks, Mayor Little. I just wish to speak in support of the resolution. Interestingly, I was speaking with a resident last week, and this resident mentioned that he didn't believe it was an issue for council to deal with, just given that it does lie in federal jurisdiction largely. And I have to say I disagree with that perspective because, of course, Metchosin is a coastal community, and the health and environmental vibrancy of the ocean does directly impact us. So I'm happy to support this motion. And again, I want to thank Alison, but also Bacon as well, who was one of the first people to raise this to council. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else wish to speak to this motion? Seeing none, I'm going to call the question. All in favor of sending this resolution? Okay. Councillor Shukin, you voted in support? Yes. Okay. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Okay. Moving along to page 25. This is also this is for the 2023 resolutions to the same conference, the AVICC. This is the protection of the old growth forests. Does anybody wish to speak to this?
Mayor Little, if I could, I would make the following motion. in support of providing this motion to the AVICC conference coming up. There has been considerable discussion about the support to protect old growth forests at this council table. And I know we maybe disagree with how to offer that support, but I think we're all in line of understanding their importance. So I wish to make the following motion. Whereas climate change and the planetary biodiversity crisis are real, and old growth forests have significant economic, social, and environmental value as wildlife habitat, tourism resources, carbon sinks, and are vital sites for biodiversity in British Columbia, and are becoming increasingly rare in the province. And whereas the province's independent panel on old growth forests called on government to, quote, declare conservation of ecosystem health and biodiversity of British Columbia's forests as an overarching priority, and enact legislation that legally establishes this priority for all sectors. Therefore, be it resolved that the AVICC and UBCM urge the government of BC to protect from logging all remaining old growth forest areas in the province.
Okay.
Motion.
That's moved by Councillor Shukin, seconded by Councillor Gray. Discussion. Anybody wish to speak to this motion? Okay, seeing none, call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, thank you. That motion's carried. Moving on to reports for action. Okay, a number of you are here to hear this. So this is the report from our planner regarding requests for the development variance permit. We've all been to the site. All 5 of us have been on a site visit. I wasn't at the site visit, but I was there 2 hours later. I was able to ask as many questions that I wanted about the variance, so I thank the owners of the property for that. I'd like to open this up for discussion, if I could ask somebody to make a motion regarding our options on page 29. Okay, Councillor Gray.
Yeah, I move that council issue a development variance permit 22.08.
Okay, that's moved by Councillor Gray, seconded by Councillor Epp. You moved the motion. Would you like to speak to it?
Well, we've had the opportunity to look at this briefing note and make a site visit, and it would appear there's also letters of support for it from the neighborhood, and we don't think we've heard any negative views from the neighborhood for the variance that's being requested. While a major variance, as was explained earlier this evening, it seems appropriate under the circumstances.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Gray. Councillor Epp.
No, it's like Councillor Gray said, we did visit the site, and I think that it all made sense to grant this variance.
Okay, great. Anything else? Councillor Donaldson, then Councillor Shukin. Go ahead, Councillor Donaldson.
One of the things that struck me as really interesting, I read it a number of times, and I was trying to wrap my head around the location of the secondary suite. And there's been, it went to the variance board, it was refused because of their mandate of minor or major variances. So the setbacks are interesting because of the way the highway is considered a different place than where their address is, and this sort of stuff. So that was something new to learn. But the one thing that actually caught me was in the report on page 28, where it says the common wall definition is as follows, and this is in the land use bylaw. Common wall means a wall with a minimum horizontal dimension of 20.5 feet and a minimum vertical dimension of 7 feet, common to the dwelling unit and the secondary suite in a dwelling unit containing a secondary suite. And for the purposes of this definition, a garage or carport may not be considered part of a dwelling. So why it caught my attention is because while I was out campaigning last fall, a number of people had actually talked to me about common law, and I didn't know too much about it, and now I know that much more. So in this particular case, there's 2 things. One, there's a variance for it to be considered as half the length, but the most outstanding thing for me is the fact that the two dwellings don't share a common well. So back in the day when the community there was what we call a working group now. It wasn't then, I don't know what they call it, but there was 12 people appointed to a committee. 4 in favor, 4 against, and 4 neutral to discuss secondary suites and detached secondary suites. And similar to our budget discussions, so it was very emotional, but legitimately so, because it has a lot to do with housing and how do we accommodate housing, and we have various different lays of land in Metchosin. And so in the end, they did come together with an insert that they could put into the land use bylaw, which is part of what we use as our guiding principles for this community. So the residents of this property are going to be demolishing the existing garage, moving it closer to the house, putting it and making it strong enough to hold the suite above it. And in the mapping, there is a linking room, it's called. It says link, I'm not sure what actually it is. But the common wall doesn't exist between the two dwellings. So I question that is, I think that this is not acceptable. I would like to see actually an option 4, in that going back to find out if there could be like a drawing to show us the dwelling that is above the garage be attached to the main dwelling, the rest of the principal residence.
Okay.
But we don't have that option here from staff.
Okay. Okay. Go ahead.
Sure. Just to speak to that point, when I look at the drawings here, I can see the common wall referred to by the planner, and it seems to meet the definition. Simply put, the common wall is shorter than what's required under our bylaw. And having visited the site and looked at it, it seemed that this was an elegant solution to the question at hand. So I'm not confused by it. There's a common wall measuring half of what would generally be required. But as regards the issue of connection, you can't subdivide the property through there. There'll be a building in the way. And that was one of the considerations of this proximity and buildings can attach and that sort of thing.
Right, and because this property is less than 2 acres, you couldn't put a detached dwelling on it either.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
Councillor Shukin, do you have any comments?
Yeah, I'm not, sorry, Councillor Donaldson's points are well taken. And what I did have a look, I had the same question, and I went back and looked at the drawings that were provided, and what you see is the breezeway, or the connecting link, actually goes right into what would be considered part of the living space. It does not connect to the garage, and there's no entry point into the garage. Had there been, I would share Councillor Donaldson's concerns, but I believe that the link, the connecting link, goes into a part that would be considered the dwelling. So I'm actually prepared to support the DDCs here.
Okay. Councillor Epp, did you want to say anything?
Well, I think I did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I would like to, I'd like to weigh in as well. What I'd like to thank these people for is in putting forward the developed variance permit and for asking permission before they do it, because what we often see in the districts is people do it and then ask for forgiveness. So I thank the applicants not only for their foresight, but also for their patience, because I know that this has been a long process. So seeing no further discussion, I'm going to call the question. And the question, the motion that Councillor Gray put forward was to issue the developed variance permit 2020-2208. All in favor? Opposed? Okay. So we have Councillor Donaldson opposed. Motion carries. Thank you. Okay. So that's the the variance permit for 4080 Dupree. Moving on to page 37. This is the the Metchosin Producers Association license of occupation renewal. So we have some options to consider here. You've got the license of occupation in front of you. No doubt you've all read it, as well as a site map at the end. What would you like to do? Councillor Epp.
I'll make a motion that council approve the license of occupation with the Metchosin Producers Association for a 3-year term as set out in the revised Schedule A, and authorize the mayor and CAO to execute the agreement.
Okay. Moved by Councillor Epp, seconded by Councillor Donaldson. Discussion. Councillor Epp.
I think that they've done a really good job with the market. It's extremely popular and a good, just a good fit in Metchosin, so I certainly support them continuing.
Okay. Councillor Epp and Councillor Donaldson.
Yeah, I just want to bring to the attention of council that I met with the president and one of the members of the Producer Association, along with, I believe the fire chief was there, and the interim CAO, and we did a walkabout to check out the concern that the SAR had with vendors being in front of the emergency access to their buildings. So that has changed on their on Schedule A of their mapping. The other thing we did was we updated the mapping a little bit more to be reflective of the handicap parking, which has been there for about a half a dozen years. So they've lost that space. They should be able to put about 2 vendors next between the washrooms and the SAR building, with a possibility of a food truck or the Galpin sausage or something, an eatery of some sort beside it. The other addition that we put in as an option, but because this is a 3-year contract or lease, it is an option that they are possibly going to explore because it has become so popular, is to have some vendors along the driveway in front of the Morley Meadow. And there are some safety factors that we still need to consider, and certainly parking on the municipal grounds is another factor. So these were just some of the adjustments that we made that we want to update their lease with, because some of the maps are, as we've found out recently, need a little bit more attention to them.
Okay. We also have some flooding issues there that we need to deal with as a district as well. Flooding down from the meadow into the Metchosin Market stalls. Any other comments? Councillor Gray. We'll do Councillor Gray and then Councillor Shukin.
Sure, I'm going to speak in favor of getting the contract executed. I just had a comment though. Schedule A could be improved somewhat because the text of the contract refers to an easement seen on Schedule A. It would be good for Schedule A to have the word easement somewhere, and I think it's the emergency access, so it should say emergency access easement, just so for clarity, so the contract sort of all fits together. I see here, maybe Councillor Donaldson, you could clarify, but it looks to me like we are in fact providing the space in front of Morley's menu once this contract is completed.
That is the addition. It wasn't there before.
Great, and I think those are my comments for now. And perhaps the other word to say is thanks so much to the Metchosin Producers Association for the wonderful work that they do here in the community. I did have one other question I just realized, and that was about the food truck. And I'm kind of confused these days about who all might use who all the vendors might be. Would that be a vendor from Metchosin? I'm not saying it should or shouldn't be. I'm just curious if that's an issue of discussion amongst the Producers Association or how that might pan out.
I can answer that question. Historically, we've had the fish and chip truck, and that was from a Metchosin resident. They've actually moved on, I think. They've closed their business here and they've opened it up in, I think, 70 Mile House. So the hope of the Producers Association is to always use local first and then go beyond that. Okay. Councillor Shukin.
I just wish to speak in support of renewing the lease, and I understand that that the producers are looking to install a number of new stalls in the next little while, so that'll be neat to see what the impact is to the market over time, and which, of course, continues to grow in popularity. So that's it. Thank you.
Okay, great. With seeing no further comment, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, thank you. Motion proceeds. Okay, moving on to the Metchosin Community Association Operating Agreement on page 45 of your council agenda. This is the Metchosin Community Association Operating Agreement Renewal. And we have options here, 1, 2, and 3. What say ye? What would you like to do? This is their operational agreement.
Councillor Donaldson had her hand.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I would move that council approve the 4-year renewal.
Okay.
Option one.
Thank you. This is moved by Councillor Shukin, seconded by Councillor Donaldson. Councillor Shukin, do you wish to speak to the motion?
No, only to support the great work that the Community Association has done over the years, and yeah, all in support of extending the lease agreement.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Donaldson, did you wish to speak?
No, I concur. They're quite the hub of activity. There's all sorts of different activities that go on there, whether it's church services or reunions, drop-in, arts, and, yeah, all sorts of a variety of things, knitting groups, that sort of stuff. It's a great gathering place for a lot of people to come and be a part of it.
I did have a question of the minimum of 2.5 million in commercial general liability. I'm just wondering, that was the district must provide that. I was wondering if I could ask the interim CAO, CFO, if that should be increased to 5 million or 2.5 million is sufficient.
So that amount of $2.5 million is consistent with what we provided, including at least for the chosen firefighter society. So
Okay.
just make consistent.
Okay. Okay. Any other comments? Go ahead, Councillor Gray.
Thank you. I guess I would ask the same question. I'd lift that to $5 million. And it's a bit confusing, the contract, really. At 11B, the district is providing commercial general liability insurance, or at least funding it. Alcohol inclusive for normal operating events of the house. And then in the next clause, 12.2, the association is asked to get liability insurance when there's alcohol served for larger groups of people. So I'm not really sure those two clauses are consistent. I would have thought that we simply have the association get an alcohol license when they have events when alcohol is being served with $5 million liability and the district being co-insured.
Okay. Susan.
So the $2.5 million is just general liability and the additional, the 12.2 is for if there's any alcohol involved. So that means that's on the community association to get the insurance for any alcohol use.
Okay. Okay. Go ahead.
So should we strike the words in 11B, alcohol inclusive? The other question I have was 13. There's this indemnity going in both directions, and I'm not sure about that either, but I didn't have a chance to inquire before the meeting about that.
I think the alcohol inclusive should be in 11B. What do you think?
I think my preference would be to get that confirmed, because I think I do agree with Councillor Gray that there may seem to be contradiction. Let's just get that confirmed so that we make sure that everybody's protected.
Okay.
Where I'm at is you see more than 100 people is where we ask the association to get insurance, but what if there's like 75 people or 99 people? then we carrying insurance for 2.5 seems inadequate to me. Anyway, correcting or taking a look at that would be a big help. The other question I had was just about the roadway being included. As people have heard in the previous discussions about these leases on the municipal property, I'm disinclined to support lease including the roadway. But I recognize that's been the pattern of activity in the past. I know Councillor Shukin is planning to meet with other users. And perhaps that's a topic of discussion and we could proceed with this as is, but understand that that's something that may solve a problem somewhere else on the grounds and might then be common for all of the users in the end.
Okay. Councillor Shukin, did you want to comment?
You know what, I'm betting that one of the reasons why the parking lot is included is because of the garage sale and the use that event takes up for what ends up being like over a month, I would say. It's speculation on my part. I'm not hung up on this. Clearly the community, the community association knows it is sharing the parking lot and working with the community on the parking lot use.
Okay. Okay, so with that, I'm going to call the question that council approved the 4-year renewal. And noting that the staff will be looking at clause 12.1 in relation to 11B for the insurance. Is that okay with you?
12.2 and 11B.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. With that, I'll call the question. All in favor?
I'm in favor.
Great. None opposed. The motion carries. Okay, 8D, this is on page 55 of your agenda. This is an administrative policy for appreciation gifts for council. So it has been past practice for some, but not all, for the District of Metchosin to provide council members who are not returning to elected office with a gift equivalent $50 per year for the service of the municipality. My feelings is that past practices does not make policy, and that's why this is why the staff is bringing this forward, so that we can formalize this, so there's no questions asked in the future, and nobody else is asked to sign past gifts that haven't gone through the appropriate approval process. Okay, so you've read this. We've got the options for council for consideration. The policy is on the back page. I think this was taken from the District of Royal, if I'm correct, in terms of what they do. And I'm interested in hearing what council would like to do on this one. Would anybody like to speak to this? So we have the options of either approving the district policy A, the appreciation gifts, which is on page 56, or send it back to staff for further information, with justification, of course. Okay. What would you like to?
So I have a question.
Yeah.
So is it for 4 years, or is it consecutive years of like 20 years, or is it, if they're 8 years? What are we actually asking? Is it just one term? And
Yeah.
$50 for each year, so it's $200 for 4 years.
Yeah, I think it would be for consecutive service,
Okay.
right?
Yeah, they would have to spend at least one term in office, it looks like, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
before this takes effect.
Mm-hmm. Anybody
So
else?
I guess my question is, if it's more than that, then is it going to be, if they're there for 2 terms, 8 years, it's $400, or is it just the fact they give service and they not do it by year, but do it by term?
No, it would be this, according to this policy, it would be by year. And so each term is a 4-year term now, and so it would be by year, according to the policy. Okay, so this is coming up in the public. Other communities are discussing severance packages and the likes. This is what has been done for some in the past. What would you like to do? Oh, sorry, Councillor Gray.
Yeah, I'm going to move a motion that council approve District of Metchosin policy number A-100.78, appreciation of gifts to council.
Okay, moved by,
And I would second that.
moved by Councillor Gray, seconded by Councillor Shukin. Discussion. Go ahead.
And I had no idea such a policy existed, but apparently it's been in place for a very long time now. And what we're doing is confirming a policy that has been in existence, if not in paper otherwise, and we should formalize it so we know where money is being spent. As to the dollar amounts, I don't have a position on it. Simply, it's been the tradition and the practice, and it's some recognition for people who sit around the table for some considerable hours. And I guess that's why I'm moving the motion.
Yeah, with just a correction, this wasn't a policy. That's the point of all of this. It wasn't a policy. It was a past practice for some, but no, not all council members, and that's why we're formalizing it into this policy. Okay, anybody else wish to? Go ahead, Councillor Shukin.
I want to commend Councillor Gray's definition of a council, someone who sits around the table for a considerable number of hours.
Okay.
That's a joke.
Okay, good. Anybody else?
I don't, I think it's good to formalize a tradition into a policy and have no reason to disapprove of this, and yeah, good move.
Okay. Seeing no other comment, I'll call a question. All in favor?
Any favor?
Okay, that's unanimous. That motion carries. Okay, and then we have the correspondence, which we thank the authors of the letter writing in support of the Dupree Road variance permit. What else do we got? The correspondence, no bylaws, no other business. We have question period because it's before 9:30, so we have up to 30 minutes or 20 minutes maximum if anybody wants to ask any questions at this time before we adjourn. Go ahead. Can you come to the mic, Katie, so the people at home can hear you too?
Hi, it's Katie Nelson of 4596 William Head. And there was mention made by Mayor regarding flooding coming from Morley's Meadow into market stalls. I can only remember a few times when the road was actually flooded, but I don't recall them actually that flooding going into market stalls that were open at that time of year. So I just wondering if you could elaborate on that.
Yeah, so I can't remember the time, but I can, unfortunately the representatives from the Producers Association have now gone, but there was significant drainage from, there's a pipe at the, what would that be, sort of the north corner that was blocked. And so there was overflow over the road into the far stalls at the farmer's market. And so that wasn't an issue of the Morley's Meadow. It was an issue of the that green space there. So it wasn't specifically.
Right, it was a maintenance issue. It wasn't
an issue of Morley's Meadow. It was a maintenance issue.
Oh, excellent. Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay.
Leonore Davidson, 900 Speyside Lane. I just have one question because between the Finance Committee one and this one here, there was a question put out about actually taxes, and it was, none of us could answer it. I understand farm status people pay a higher rate of tax. Did any of you know that?
Actually, I think it's the opposite. It's the opposite in that if you have ALC recognition of and you have farm status, you pay lower taxes.
But I understand, just like industrial, you pay a higher rate. That's the question. I should have made that clearer. A different rate for residential, industrial, farm status, and agricultural. And so that was a question we wondered, is farm status charged a different rate of tax?
Okay.
Just like industrial.
Yeah.
None of us can answer that.
I can't answer that either.
This is something we'd be interested in knowing. I felt it couldn't be possible, but who knows?
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we'll get some information, Celine, for that in the future. Would you like to speak to that?
Yes, please.
Uh-huh.
So the rates are a charge levied different for classes. So municipalities who have the option of depending on what you class of properties you see as being important in your community. So for example, even though normally business are charged higher than residential, for mill rates, some communities do consider they don't charge businesses as high as others because they see that business do add a lot of value to the community. So same with farm classes, it's charged a different rate to residential, but whatever rate it is up to council to decide. So that is the exercise that will be happening at the end of April or May.
Okay. Okay. Great. Do we have any other questions from the community? We'll find out some information for you.
So does that mean that you will look at it and decide what rate the farm status people will pay each year?
According to the mill rate, yes.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Gray, seconded by Councillor Shukin. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, great. Thank you for the great
Thank you.
discussion, everybody. And thank you for turning out to this meeting.